300 years ago, the anomaly caused the collapse of the global civilization that had emerged from the post war era of the mid 20th century. To this day, there is still no explanation of the anomaly itself, only what it did. It resurrected every extinct species of animal that had ever lived on Earth over a period of a few years. The old civilization could not handle it and collapsed amid the pressure and collapsing ecosystems it was built upon. Following the collapse, survivors banded into various communities, and some, in the western portion of what was Ohio, came into conflict. About a decade after the anomaly, a vicious war was fought between the two sides. The United Communities of Ohio, consisting of multiple smaller communities that united together, and the Patriots, a much more advanced, powerful, and larger community. Their military was led by a man named Carl Newton, a man who amassed a loyal following of like-minded psychopaths, yes men that he surrounded himself with. They worked to keep a majority of the Patriots in the dark when it came to their true evil acts, and ultimately it only came out when they attacked the United Communities, and the communities fought back against them. The war need not be described, you can read about it in the previous section. For context, just know that the United Communities prevailed, and a peace treaty between the two communities was signed, and an age of cooperation began between the former enemies. However, many of those within the Patriots were fanatics, and were not satisfied with the outcome, and with cult-like determination, these like-minded individuals came together and hatched a plan, and began the groundwork to see it play out. Their goal was nothing short but the total and complete annihilation of the United Communities of Ohio. So they operated right under the noses of the rest of the Patriots, coming to call themselves the True Patriots. All within this terrorist group were followers of Carl Newton, or at least followers of his ideas. The following events occurred a little under 3 centuries ago, a decade into these communities' own post-war era. This is how the True Patriots' plot was uncovered, and how a deep web of conspiracies was unmasked, and how their secret weapon, a hybrid made of a mashed up collage of various prehistoric animals, was discovered just in the nick of time. Sourced from surviving documents, reports, or memoirs. Compiled and edited to form a cohesive, seamless narrative. Where blank spaces exist, all sources were used to form the best speculative reconstruction as possible. That morning, all was quiet within the walls of the Patriot City. Despite the feelings of some, the reality was that they were still limited on the number of guns they were allowed to have. According to the strict doctrine of surrender they had signed, it wouldn't be until at least 15 years after the war before that fact would be subject to re-examination. So, in order to compensate for the low supply of guns, only those guards on duty were allowed to have access to the limited armory. Weapons were only given to actual soldiers when they needed them, but they hadn't used them for anything other than training for 8 years. 8 years prior, a small group of people wearing ghillie suits tried to kill a group of patriots leaving for a scavenging mission. There was a small firefight in the forest that same day, with a squad of patriot soldiers engaging in a shootout with a nearly invisible group of sharpshooters armed with rifles. They were extremely accurate with their shots, and delivered death efficiently. No records of the details of the skirmish survive today. Only a single footnote makes a mention of it, and it was quoted almost word for word in its entirety here. The last time the Patriot soldiers were in combat before the following events was about 2 years prior, when a pack of unknown feathered theropod dinosaurs began attacking groups on patrol at the border of the Patriots' territory. The dinosaurs were covered in tan and red feathers, with gray scaly skin and predatory green eyes. The hunt lasted months, and the dinosaurs proved to be smart and elusive, vanishing into the forest with seemingly unnatural ease. Throughout all of it, the Patriots only killed 2 of the dinosaurs before the pack decided to leave the area. It was a sudden, brutal reminder of how dangerous dinosaurs really were. But that was a different kind of danger than the kind presented when malicious people were the threat. The going was tough, but the Patriots made use of the weapons they had. Carl might have been long dead, but the damage he did still lingered. It was clear to all that the Patriots would likely never get back to the glory days they'd enjoyed before Carl's coup. Nonetheless, they continued on with heads held high. They were better off without him, circumstances aside. Despite the limited guns, new recruits to the Patriots' military force were often welcome, and arms were shared among them all. Recruits were trained and used to protect the city or patrol their territory once they were ready to begin active duty. One of those new recruits was Dylan Fitzpatrick, who had only been 10 years old during the war. His training was complete, and he was now ready to be given his first assignment. He'd be given his first assignment by his commanding officer, known only in records as the Colonel. The Colonel, the highest-ranking man in the military at that time, and its overseer, had been placed in that position in the aftermath of the war. He was one of the few in the military hierarchy Carl had organized to remain in a position of power. Despite the close relationship he'd had with Carl, he hadn't been among those relieved of power after the war. Many under his command noted that he had seemed to never get past the fact the Patriots had lost. The Colonel, who had reached that military rank before the apocalypse, still wore his old uniform, which he kept in perfect condition. Each day, he'd stand before the rest of the Patriots' military personnel and assign each person their daily jobs. In times of peace, most found they simply worked one day at a time, doing odd jobs most of the time. Dylan stood up straight as his name was called. "Patrolling the sub-level tunnel system underneath the labs," the Colonel told them. Great. Dark, underground tunnels full of empty cages where the army that never came to be would have been kept. Nothing there but leaky pipes, concrete so stained it was brown, dim buzzing yellow lights, and mildew. Wonderful. "Sir, there's nothing down there. Why do I have to patrol it?" "See to it that it stays that way. Get a weapon from the armory before you go. I have a written statement here granting you access. Dismissed." "A weapon? Sir, why do I need a weapon if there's nothing down there?" Dylan asked. He didn't get an answer. The Colonel simply turned away from him and read off the next name on the list. Dylan sighed in frustration and grabbed the paper slip he'd show to the armory guards. Don't feel bad," one of the recruits Dylan had trained with said. "Apparently he always seems to single someone out for that job. Must have his reasons for it. Maybe he sees something in you." In the cage, the Dinosaur watched people pass him. He had black scales and green eyes that lacked discernible pupils, and glowed with bright bioluminescence. His cage was so dark that, due to his black scales, his eyes would often be the only part of him you could see. He would scratch the floor and walls of the concrete room just to hear the sound or to let out his anger. His claws were so dense that they'd leave deep, visible marks behind without dulling them. The bars and iron door didn't offer the same effect. Scratching them offered nothing but the tease of freedom to which he had no access. His life had been in the dark cage, and he knew nothing else. He had been made by the people in lab coats, the ones he watched walk past him daily, and he wanted nothing more than to sink his large claws into them. Fortunately, that was simply a passing fantasy for the dinosaur, and he knew it. The people in the lab coats didn't care about him. They didn't care that he wanted to kill them, and he knew he couldn't reach them. The hybrid also knew they had plans for him, but what they were was something he could only guess at. And with years continuing to pass without change, who knew how long it would be until he learned what they wanted him for? 7 7 years in this cage, he thought with a hiss. The anomaly had created something called variants amid the sea of resurrected once extinct animals. These variants, rare creatures, were smarter. As smart as a modern human, even, and could be found in any of the resurrected species, from dinosaurs to birds to Cambrian ocean dwelling arthropods, or the giant insects of the Carboniferous, or even in something like a Dinotherium, and everything in between. Variants had been used as sources for creating the hybrid, their DNA harvested from unwilling specimens. Thus, he, the hybrid, was as smart as a human trapped in a cage. Below is a fragmented series of notes written by one of his creators, found in a partially burned journal sometime after these events occurred. They seem to be the ramblings of a madman. Dunkleosteus for armor, Spinosaurus for strength, Utahraptor for speed. It stood about 10 feet tall. It had huge arms, armor on its whole body, the spiky tail of a Stegosaurus, the killing toe claws of a Utahraptor, the sail of the Spinosaurus, the twin crests of the Dilophosaurus, the head of an Allosaurus, and the powerful jaws of a Tyrannosaurus rex. It took 3 years, but the creature was made. The idea prevailed. Version 1 had been born. Another thing about variants. Though common now, they'd been rare in the initial decades. Thus, when someone happened upon one, it would be a shock, especially when they showed they could speak. Variants could speak. They could speak with us. Many, now famous and almost legendary friendships were forged between humans and variants in those initial days. Something that's common now, of course, but in those days, speaking with one was a bit shocking and unexpected. Before these events, Dylan Fitzpatrick had never encountered one. Dylan walked through the dark tunnels. The lights overhead that weren't out were a dim yellow. Only the lights in the main corridor still worked. The side corridors were pitch black and seemed to lead off into a void. The unease the tunnels gave off was enough to make Dylan rest his hand on the trigger of his weapon. He passed empty cells of varying sizes on each side of him. Each was a concrete room, stained brown from long years of being unmaintained and being eroded by the damp air. Each cell was lined with bars along the wall that met the corridor so scientists could observe what creature was inside. And each cell also had an iron door that a person could enter if they so wished. It was made by those who'd run the lab back in the 1950s, according to records, when it was originally in operation and all manner of unethical experiments had been performed. The lab had been intended to be repurposed for holding an army that never came to be. It was disturbing, and the areas without any light didn't help. Lining the ceiling of the tunnels, which were originally maintenance tunnels, were rusted pipes, which were dripping at their joints and rusted valves. The tunnels were very extensive and were more like a giant maze in terms of layout. Most of the tunnels had exits, but a few ended up in a set of stairs that led out into the streets above. Most of the corridors were dark, and only the main passages remained illuminated. Some of the tunnels had been permanently sealed off. Dylan didn't want to think about what secrets might have been sealed off with them. There was no one else on this level. Access was strictly controlled, so why he had to patrol here was beyond him. And every time Dylan passed one of the few branching tunnels that went off into blackness, his mind imagined something charging out of them, its arms reaching out for him. He shook his head to clear those unneeded thoughts and moved on. He didn't need to scare himself when there was nothing there. Nothing in any of the dark corridors, and nothing in any of the unused cells. Or so he thought. As he was following along one of the better lit tunnels, He thought he caught a glimpse of something in what was likely just another empty cage among the hundreds. To appease his own mind, he took a few steps backwards, though, and glanced in through the bars. After a few seconds of staring, he noticed what he'd almost overlooked seconds prior. At the back of the empty cage, where there was no light reaching at all, was a shape that was even darker than the cell's absence of light. Dylan jumped back in surprise and fright as a loud snort accompanied by movement in the blackness issued out from the cell. Two glowing green orbs, unblinking but very much alive, appeared and stared at him from the darkness inside the cell, both glinting with the hope that he would step just a little closer to the bars. Dylan took a step back to the opposite wall, shaking slightly at the sudden appearance of a form inside what was supposed to be an empty cell. Dylan watched with wide eyes as, slowly, a hand with 4 clawed fingers emerged from the darkness, scratching the floor lightly. As the thing in the cage slowly emerged into the illuminated half of the cell, its jaws appeared next. Dylan first saw the teeth, then the drool dripping from its half-open maw in long strings down to the damp floor. It was a dinosaur. That was obvious, but it looked weird, and he could not identify it. Its head was adorned with the twin crests from a Dilophosaurus, and it was covered in a layer of what looked like the bony, shielding armored plates off of a Dunkleosteus's head and thorax. The plates, which covered its head, also extended down its neck and then along its upper back. It clicked the large toe claws of a Utah raptor on the concrete floor. It studied Dylan for several seconds, never fully making itself visible. Then the look in its eyes changed. It snorted again and turned its back on Dylan, laying down with its Spinosaurus-like sail now facing him. Realization finally dawned in Dylan's mind as he whispered, "The perfect weapon." He knew that a secret creature had reportedly been hatched years ago. The project was supposed to have been cancelled immediately after the war ended. Apparently, it had not been. The outcome was the hybrid dinosaur he was now just feet away from in the dark underground tunnel. Dylan knew he should run, but his curiosity was too great. Instead, he walked up to the bars and looked inside, wanting a better look at the thing. Son of a bitch. They actually made it, he muttered, wondering how long the hybrid had been down here. The hybrid's head turned around to face him again, and it snarled, causing Dylan to jump back. The dinosaur looked him up and down again, examining him, especially his face. "You're definitely not one of them with the coats," it said. No, I'm not. I was just wondering if you were okay," Dylan managed to say, making up the sentence as he went along due to his shock. He was hoping he had strung something coherent together. The hybrid looked at him for a second, then snarled, "Am I okay? Am I okay? No, I am not okay," it roared, getting to its feet and stomping up to the bars. "How do you think it is to only know a single cage your entire life? You take so much for granted just being able to walk down these tunnels." It backed off a few steps, dropping down onto all fours as it continued speaking, its head now at eye level with Dylan's. "You don't have to spend your life in the dark, being starved and experimented on, and being tortured just for fun, being told over and over they live free and outside just to make you plead for them to be kinder. Do what we want, and you'll have everything, is how they say it. They don't deserve that, so they keep me here in the dark, day after day, year after year." Now being in the light again, Dylan could make out more of its features. He could see its body shape was somewhat like a velociraptor, but not the same. The long arms allowed it to stand either on 2 legs or down on all fours. The hybrid snorted again and turned away, smacking the bars with its tail, causing a loud bang to echo down the tunnel. Dylan saw that The plated armor ran down the top side of its tail, which had a set of Stegosaurus stagomizers at the end. The hybrid retreated into the darkness and laid back down, its eyes hidden in the darkness, now completely hiding the dinosaur from view. Dylan couldn't see it, but the animal was shaking and there were silent tears falling from the dinosaur's eyes, one of the very few times it allowed the stabbing waves of despair to leak out instead of just keeping it all bottled in. The flare-up of emotions had been enough, and the seething anger turned into a wave of shattering despair so powerful that the hybrid could not hold it in. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I had heard rumors, but I thought this place was deserted. Dylan called after a moment, not sure why he was still talking to it. It's not your fault, the dinosaur said, also not sure why it was continuing the conversation. I've never seen you, so I know you're not part of the reason I'm here. Dylan felt horrible for the poor thing, but his nature of wanting to help anyone in distress got the better of him. His instinct told him it was a stupid idea. His brain was telling him to just walk away, but couldn't do it. He stepped toward the iron door. Using the keys he was given, Dylan unlocked the heavy iron door and stepped inside the cage, keeping the door, which was too small for the dinosaur to escape through, open. Dylan remained just a few steps away from it. He wasn't sure what he was going to do, but he didn't even get to speak. He had a hand up, trying to think of something to say, when the hybrid's tail suddenly swung out of the darkness, and it tripped him, making him fall back and slam his head on the concrete. Between the spinning stars he was seeing, Dylan could make out the hybrid looming over him, almost seeming to materialize out of the darkness. As his vision cleared, it slammed its right hand down onto his chest and pinned him to the spot, lowering its head and sniffing him. That was a very, very stupid thing to do, the dinosaur said, keeping Dylan pinned on the floor under its hand. It snarled and lifted its other hand. I haven't eaten in more than a week, so I'll say thank you for being an idiot. It slowly began to lower its hand, its claws gleaming in the dim light. It parted its jaws eagerly, salivating and licking its lips, each of its long, pointed teeth on display. Dylan squeezed his eyes shut, knowing that he was going to die. But the pain didn't come. The dinosaur just seemed to lose interest. Its hand was frozen, inches above his neck, shaking. Then it lowered the claws away. The hybrid looked apathetic. You're not the one I want to kill. You're just an ignorant, stupid man. As hungry as I am, you're innocent of this and don't deserve death, it grumbled, stepping away from Dylan. It returned to the darkest area of its cell, leaving Dylan on the floor with nothing more serious than a bad headache. Dylan lay on the floor for several moments, surprised he hadn't been gutted and eaten on the spot. When he finally sat up, he glanced at his weapon, which was on the ground by the door, but he didn't reach for it. He looked back at the hybrid and saw it had curled itself up along the far wall, and this time he could see the tears that were falling from its eyes. Dylan had a feeling that they weren't crocodile tears, but real ones. This dinosaur was truly hurting. Though at that time variants were still poorly understood at best, it was known that if a dinosaur or other animal could talk, then it was as complex as a human and should be treated as such. This was something Dylan had learned in school. Dylan stood, and, since it hadn't killed him already, he decided to take a chance. He slowly approached the dinosaur and sat down by its head. He hesitantly reached out and gently, comfortingly, began to stroke its nose. Its eyes opened again and their gazes locked. You didn't leave, it said. Am I still stupid? Dylan asked. The hybrid looked at him for a moment, then it placed its head in his lap. "Don't leave, please. I don't want to be alone," it whispered pleadingly. It sounded like a scared child wanting comfort. Um, okay, I can stay a while. I'm assigned here too, so I can come back around every day. If you'd like that, Dylan replied. The hybrid let out a slow, contented sigh. It sounded pleased with the idea of a friendly interaction. "Thank you," the dinosaur said, lifting its head to look Dylan in the eye again. Its snout was so close that it caused Dylan to lean back slightly. "No problem. Um, do you have a name?" Dylan questioned after a moment of silence. 000001, it said bluntly. That made perfect sense. He must have been the first. It also showed that whoever allowed for the creation of the animal to still take place illegally planned to make more. Lots more. An insane amount, even. "That's no name. That's just a number." "Shall I give you a real name?" Dylan asked, for now putting the implications aside. Taking a moment to look over the dinosaur fully, he saw that all the things he'd noticed during his quick glimpses were correct. It indeed had thick armor, Thagomisers on its tail, and the Utah Raptor's infamous sickle-like claws on the inner toe of each foot. He also noticed the hybrid's ribs were very exposed. It was obviously not well fed. If Dylan had to guess, it had only been fed just enough to keep it alive. That made Dylan a little more nervous, but he didn't believe the hybrid would eat him now. But the possibility that it could lose control did linger in the back of his mind. "Thank you again," the hybrid said. It seemed to like the idea of being given a real name instead of just being called a number. With another sigh, it placed its head back on Dylan's lap. 000001's head was still resting on Dylan's lap hours later, and he could hear its stomach growling. The hybrid was giving Dylan a strange look, but it kept itself under control. Dylan knew the dinosaur likely thought he looked appetizing, but it didn't make a move to hurt him. The amount of restraint it had was remarkable. "Do you have any food?" it finally asked. "Just some dry jerky," Dylan replied, pulling a bag from his pocket and pulling out a tiny piece of shriveled meat. "That's all they gave me for my lunch today," Dylan said. The dinosaur opened its jaws, and Dylan placed all the dried meat inside on its dry tongue. 000001 swallowed it inside. Dylan knew such a small bit wouldn't make a difference, but there was nothing more he could do. The only other thing it could have eaten was Dylan, and he felt he'd much rather not be someone's lunch at the moment. Dylan was still caught off guard when the hybrid's arm wrapped around him suddenly tightly. It held Dylan against its body and spoke. "I know that didn't help my empty stomach, but what you did was more than the people who created me ever have done. So thank you." The dinosaur whispered. "I see you truly are someone I could call a friend. I promise that I'll never hurt you." Dylan nodded, feeling the hybrid's arm wrapped around his waist. "I'll, try to maybe swipe some dry fish on my way down here tomorrow, okay? No guarantee I can pull it off, but I'll try." The hybrid's tail swayed over the floor approvingly at the idea and held him even tighter for a moment. In a way, they were very similar, Dylan came to realize. Two lonely souls within their own types of cages. Maybe as friends, they'd both be able to find something to smile about. I, um, I'm going to have to go soon," Dylan said after a while, trying to sit up, but the hybrid wouldn't let him. "Why?" it asked. Its arm was still wrapped around Dylan, and he felt the dinosaur tightening its grip on him. It didn't want to let the only creature to ever show him kindness go. Maybe he wouldn't let Dylan leave. Ever. I'm supposed to report in. If I don't, there might be a problem. I promise. I'll come back every day I can, Dylan said. But for now, I really do need to go. Please? Okay, the hybrid replied, and he reluctantly let go of Dylan. As Dylan sat up again, he rubbed the snout of the dinosaur and said, I promise I'll come back. I wouldn't leave unless I really had to, Dylan assured the dinosaur. Wish you could stay, the hybrid said. Dylan smiled and nodded. I kinda do too. As he walked toward the door, the hybrid spoke again. They hurt me. Dylan stopped in his tracks and looked at it. Spoke again. Every time. They do painful things to me. I'll do everything I can to help you, Dylan said, stepping out and reluctantly locking the door. If the dino could have fit through it, he would have left it open. I don't understand it all, though. The original hybrid dinosaur project during the war was cancelled. You were made in secret for some reason, so I'm going to keep it close to the chest for now, till I know more. He went to the bars and added, Don't worry. Something good will happen. One day. It always does. He started to walk off, but stopped. Thanks again for not killing me. That was stupid of me for just walking inside. The hybrid chuckled softly. You would have been a very filling meal. Lucky for you, you're not one of the people I want to kill. I suppose so. Next time I visit, we'll have to give you a real name, Dylan said before walking away. As he walked back down the path he came from, he'd hoped he'd done something good. He really did want to get to know the hybrid better and make him happier. If he could do that, he'd be happy. Maybe, just maybe, he could help the poor thing too, but that would mean he'd have to learn to be more discreet. He was also content for the time to just talk with the hybrid, to help it in ways that were meaningful no matter how small. Now, he had a reason to like his assignment. The asset refuses to follow orders. I believe it is the lack of having a human in charge of it. Less interaction. I told you before it hatched. No human ever bonded with it. Instead, it and its sibling were allowed to develop on their own while only experiencing pain from the humans around them. I say that he doesn't matter. Version 1 was always expected to be unused in the end as plans began to evolve. The next one will be the true masterpiece, Ian said. His assistant had come to him with opinions again. It's already been designed, with the exception of a few details that I'm still going back and forth on. Built off the base of the original, but superior to it every way. Deadly on land and in the water. Every last detail thought of. A perfect animal that is designed for killing and combat. Version 2 will be my masterpiece. He will be the most dangerous animal to ever walk on the planet. Even evolution could never cook up something like him. He could kill a Giganotosaurus on his own, and he'll only be slightly taller than version 1. For those who did not read the section about the war, we'll explain briefly who Ian was. A rather infamous individual in our history, many see him as the embodiment of unethical science, and some even as the embodiment of evil. Ian was a scientist, who was the only man Carl Newton truly trusted. Together they had cooked up the hybrid dinosaur project before the war. During it, Ian had finally unveiled it, and after the war, he and loyal scientists had continued on in the shadows. Ian believed ethical laws about the treatment of scientific subjects had held science back before the apocalypse, and once the anomaly had struck, he had been left in a world without those laws to do as he pleased, and he had all manner of poor creatures to play with, and he was in a place that had the resources to allow him to try things. All of this can be read in the section covering the Patriots' War. Ian's assistant continued to press his concerns. It needs to interact with people. The next one must have a commanding parental figure. At the very least, someone it knows is in charge, or it will also have a freer will than you want and may not follow orders. You must also assure Miller of this. He is already threatening to wash his hands of our research and frame us for terrorism, of all things. And he could easily get away with it with how many laws you insist we violate in the name of science. The failure of version 1 is giving him cold feet, especially with the sibling dead. I've told you many times that your methods of trying to make version 1 submit to orders were not ideal. They've only made it defiant. We should have supplied a nurturing environment for it to grow and train in. Ian smiled. Tim, your concern is noted. I will speak to Miller soon, but we need to do this quickly as we can. After all, an army may be useful if we ever decide to retry the old game. Ian, you go too far. We aren't going to try to take over the United Communities of Ohio again. This whole project was meant to be for protecting us and our people since we have very few guns anymore. Now, onto the topic of protection, your idea that version 1 will eventually submit without outside stimuli appears to be incorrect, considering 7 years have passed since its birth. For version, not everyone agreed to the idea of existing as equals, Tim. Not everyone agreed, Ian said, cutting him off. What are you talking about? Ian met Tim's eye for a moment, then said, on the topic of version 2, what if we added Titanoboa DNA and gave the next hybrid some of its physical features? Unhinging jaw and thermal vision, for example. I also had an idea for the use of DNA from the Edestis shark. Edestis, by the way, is translated from the words to devour in Greek, which makes it appropriately foreboding, and by weaving its DNA into version 2's genetics, we could use some of the shark's rather scary physical features. The structure of the teeth from the Edestis, for example, would make for a more frightening appear. Sir, what do you mean by not everyone agreed? Tim interrupted, not able to hold back his suspicions over Ian's statement. You'll see soon, Ian replied. You will see very soon. For now, just keep putting that brilliant brain of yours to use. Version 2 will never exist if we don't work together. And the progress on version 3 has slightly pulled ahead, which is not what we want. I want them born around the same time. But if version 2 remains stalled, then that's not going to happen. Tim took a step forward. Sir, you specifically told me these hybrids would be used for defense of the community in place of our lack of guns. That's why I agreed to bend the law and help you with this project. But I've read everything you want for version 2. When I put that together with what you just told me, it sounds more like you want to create a monster for killing rather than something to protect us. Why would we need an animal designed for defense to be scary looking? Ian regarded Tim with a smile. Version 2 will solve all of our problems, he simply said. To be continued. The Hybrid Part 1. Read from the Spinosaurus by the author. Man, does it feel good to not only record a video for the first time in months, it feels great actually, but to also finally get back to recording stuff and putting stuff out about my novel. I haven't really done anything with the novel stuff for, 10 months or something? So it just feels great to finally get to narrating more of it again. And I hope you enjoyed this chapter. please check out the other readings. I'll link a couple in the end cards and some other stuff in the description if you want to see more. And tell me what you think. I take all feedback. I read all feedback. I love just reading comments and hearing what people think. And most importantly, thank you for watching and or listening to this video. It really means the most to me, and again, it feels great to be back. In my next documentary, I will offer an explanation as to where I've been. I'll just say that for now, work this year, especially over the summer, really just took everything out of me, and I can describe it in one sentence. Having to cut out a bunch of tornado damage with a crosscut saw. Yeah, I'll offer more context onto that and whenever I finally get back to doing shorter videos. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you understand. Thank you one more time for watching and or listening, and have a wonderful day, everybody. I think I said wonderful stay, everybody. I meant wonderful day. Have a wonderful day, everybody.